whether it's AI or any piece of technology, it's still really only as good as the people operating it. And we frequently encounter organizations that want to spend their money on the shiny tools.
Welcome to the Circuit Magazine, the #1 source of information on protection matters, the industry-leading magazine for all security professionals who want to stay ahead of the game.
Rethinking Security Convergence. Today, Elijah Shaw and myself are delighted to be speaking with Katie Barnett and Gavin Wilson, both security experts, but Katie, a cybersecurity expert, and Gavin, a physical/corporate security expert. Elijah, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's good to be back. Glad to be with my UK buddy on the other side of the globe here, and we've got some great people on joining us for the conversation today.
Well, it's great to have you back, and it's great to mull over this topic in a very practical way for the operator. Because I think initially, every time people hear convergence, they say, nice, but what about me?
Right. For me, I'm always a big believer in plain speak. And with that said, I know there are some technical terms and some subjects that you kind of had to have some technical expertise in order to kind of dive into. But I love it when people that we have on the show can kind of communicate those things and show the real world applicability to it. And I thought Katie and Gavin did a great job in discussing the topic of convergence, but also showing how how we can use it in our lives as as operators in the field right now.
Absolutely. And I think as operators, out in the field, people will think, okay, do I have to go back and learn how to code? And then we can reveal to them, cybersecurity is much more than coding, and probably not, in fact, any coding in many respects. But that it could be you and your buddy. I know that's an oversimplification, but I like to see it that way because Gavin and Katie play off each other very well and work together very well as a team.
I agree. In fact, one of the terms they kept using that I kind of made a note of was the word holistic. And, holistic, to me is very synonymous with organic. And so you can see kind of the relationship piece. And so you have the physical security on one end, and on the other side you have cyber, but being able to blend those two together in order to create a total coverage for your client. That only works if everybody's firing on the same cylinder, if everybody is speaking from the same hymn book. And so you guys use the word hymn book. I don't know if that's
we say singing from the same hymn.
All right, okay, got it. I might have butchered the phrase anyway, but it only works if everybody's on the same page. And so with that said, listening to those two, I could tell they were on the same page, and so I really found value in that.
And do you think principals are looking towards the protector and thinking, well, you look after part of my security, so I suppose you should look after all of it? Do they really do that?
Of course, because I think in everything, budgets play a part, and I think that's why it's important to be able to kind of quantify and be able to talk about what the roles are and what the value is to the organization or the value is to the protectee. Once you're able to do that, then you can say, this is why we need this, or this is why this is important.
Yeah, and perhaps one could bring in the other. It could be,
sure.
a partnership, and above all, it doesn't have to be you as the everything person.
Absolutely. One of the takeaways when I was listening to them is that Gavin mentioned that he started off in IT, so he had a knowledge of this, going into physical security, and so that means it's a little bit easier to make people understand who might not get what IT does, what cyber does, and think maybe it's just totally coding or some aspect of the business that is so arcane or esoteric that we need to stay away from because we just handle the nuts and bolts.
I love it. Well, let's get into it with Gavin and Katie from Toro Solutions. I think this will be practical. This will be applicable to the protector, and good to update the topic, because I think we've kind of looked at this on a couple other podcast sessions. So let's get into it. Reimagining security convergence with Gavin and Katie from Toro Solutions.
And now, let's meet one of the contributors to the Circuit magazine.
Rethinking security convergence. I'm delighted to welcome Katie Barnett, Toro's cyber lead, and Gavin Wilson, Toro's physical security lead. How are you both doing?
Very well, thank you, Phelim. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Well as well.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you both on. And this is a good format because we are looking at both sides of the house, so to speak. Of course, there are more sides. But what are we trying to solve? Because we've been talking convergence, quote unquote, for years. What could a podcast like this hope to try and achieve?
Why do we need convergence? Well, the problem is that the attack is converged, right? So the threat actors we're facing, the context, they are not adopting a linear approach. They are following the path of least resistance, and that is going to touch on all of our domains in security. So we need to have a converged approach to be able to defend against that converged attack.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. What about for you, Gavin? I'm going to give you the physical hat.
Yeah, I think it's the same whether you're wearing the physical or the cyber hat. Really, we're seeing, and you only have to watch the news, any version of the media anyway, that, these threat activities, risk events are happening faster and harder nowadays. We can't really sit still. Technology is an enablement for both the threat actor and the security defender. Really, we have to take a more aligned and interconnected approach to doing security in order to be able to keep pace with the change that we're seeing. As Katie alluded to, the attacker will normally follow the pathway of least resistance. If they can't get to you physically within a building, they'll try to do that through other means, which is normally online or through an IT network or some kind of breach. Nowadays, it's normally using a combination of both. Social engineering people, getting access to passwords, breaching data sets, getting physical access into a building or to an asset, whatever that may be, in order to achieve their goal. We have to think about security as a more holistic, risk-managed approach, and less so as a siloed, risk-managed approach.
All right. Okay. Well, this, laudable goal, and of course, many people will be aware of, hybrid threats that are facing the industry. But let's take a step back. Obviously, I'm very pleased to have you both on the podcast. But where does your passion for this come from? Tell us a bit about yourself, your journey, your passion. Katie.
Bit of an odd journey for me, actually. IT was always my hobby job. It wasn't something I thought I was going to go into as a career. I actually did politics at uni, and then I converted to law. I trained and qualified as a commercial solicitor, and then immediately left because I decided that I didn't feel passionate about it, and instead did pursue my hobby job in IT. And so for me, the passion is born out of practice, that experience on the job where I was fortunate enough to grow with an organization that faced a converged risk, really. And by virtue of no one else stepping into the void and addressing the different elements of security, the humble IT manager that I was as I started out in that organization, ended up taking on the mantle of security across the physical and the personnel domain as well. And that was working with a bunch of creative people that were operating on government contracts. So had to be very compliant. It was a high risk environment. Some of the campaigns and the projects, so highly securitized. And I felt a personal sense of responsibility to cover off all bases and learn on the job, actually, how to address it, because it was obvious that I couldn't just tick the IT box or the cyber security box, because if I did, then the doors would be open, the access control wouldn't work, my comms room wouldn't be secure. We wouldn't know if anyone was coming into the building or not. And when we sent people traveling to conflict zones, I wouldn't know if they were safe. So, very much the practical elements of security in practice is where this is born for me.
I love that hobby job transformation, and also the question of nature nurture, the question of coaching, hands-on training versus book training, and so on. We can get onto all of that, but I think that's really really useful to know. What about for you, Gavin? Obviously, many people in the EP world know you, but where does your passion for this come from?
It kind of grew over time. I didn't set out to work in security. I worked in IT at a young age, and then I moved into security and worked my way up from the bottom. I'd say I'm very lucky in my career. I've had the opportunity to work and be mentored by some very amazing people. And I'd say that's what security does well. And for me, when I came into the industry and started working my way up from my first line manager through to their manager, and I've always been looked after and nurtured in a way that I think they've got the best out of me. And so my passion started to grow as I started to become more natural at doing security, and not just security, but risk. The foundation of security is risk and incident management, resilience. And it was really around applying yourself, working hard, proving yourself constantly. But if you do that, and I think in my case, I say I've been very lucky in my career, lots of opportunities, because I've been well positioned to do that as people have nurtured me and got the best out of me. Whereas I'm now where I am in my career, working opposite the amazing Katie and showing her what proper security is, and physical, of course. But
I always have to laugh when Gavin talks about starting off in IT, because now I swear computers just blow up around him.
Yeah, because
that's why we need converged security.
Yeah, I am one of these people that has probably got such an electromagnetic field that nothing works for me. But you've got to remember, Katie, when I worked in IT, IT wasn't what it is now. It was
that's where you practice your two-finger typing, isn't it?
It is, and that's when the keyboard's actually cleared. But I was working on 386D SXs and then DXs and 486s. I remember the first Pentium. And so the way we use computers nowadays is very different to back then. Mm-hmm. And so damage control with me around computers was more limited than what it is now.
But it's a good point, right? Because every company will claim not to be an IT company, but no company can, or even individual can exist without their devices.
Yeah.
Mm. And that also kind of might resonate with the listenership, because maybe quote unquote back in the day, people were very hardware focused. Okay, there were other people who were very software focused, but a lot of people started off with hardware. Then it became a little bit more involved, and it lost a few people along the way, which is funny because before all of my friends were doing QBasic, VBasic, and things like that. So what about the uninitiated that says that these terms that we've been using, I don't really get them, and convergence, I've heard about it, but I just feel it's beyond me. What should the uninitiated in that sense better try to understand?
I think you just got to understand we do it naturally anyway. I think the world is, in whatever you do, is interconnected. That's what technology has done for us. It's connected us in such a way that everything we do seems to be scripted within some kind of application, or there are not many people out there that don't have a digital footprint somewhere doing something. I think convergence or interconnectivity, I get a bit bored of the word convergence. I remember going back to the early 2000s when it was such a big buzzword. Nobody really understood. Everybody understood it to be the working togetherness of cyber and physical. It's much more than that. I think it is interconnectivity, and it's about driving performance in what we do. I think we do it naturally in our lives now. It's there. I don't think we kind of fully understand where it fits into security, or we have an impression of it, but we keep on going back and falling back onto, well, if you work in security, it's your responsibility to convergence, where when we put it into context, there are so many different functions within organizations that have a role to play in security, whether it's in HR or finance and payroll and all of these things, that actually that true convergence is that interconnectivity and that alignment of working within your job, within that organization. So that's kind of what it means to me and the way I look at it.
But
I
that
don't know.
then and now comparison is relevant, because I think convergence used to happen more naturally without perhaps us needing to talk about it so much, because we used to just, if you think like the attacker, we need to understand what our crown jewels are, right? What are the critical things that we're trying to protect at all costs? And if I'm the threat actor or the attacker, how am I going to approach them? Now, historically, from an IT perspective, we used to use an analogy, the castle and moat, but that works from a physical perspective as well, right? We used to have just a premises, a property, an office, and our crown jewels would reside within that. But all of our protections were largely just placed around the outside. But now, our crown jewels could be accessible from anywhere, because we've got cloud computing, we've got mobile devices, we've got computers that we carry around in our pockets 24/7. And so actually that attack surface area is so varied. Your phone could be stolen whilst you're using it out and about. And if it's unlocked, that criminal attacker has access to your whole life then, whether it's data, whether it's opening your apps to your bank accounts, whether it's your contacts, your photos, whether it's the intruder alarm or the CCTV at your house, because that's also connected via an app. And so the interconnectivity that Gavin's talking about is just harder to map because it's so disparate, whereas historically it may have all been contained, and therefore it was easy to just wrap our security around it.
So we no longer live in castles, do we?
We don't.
Well, speak for yourself. No, but with this, am I safe in saying that the idea of the singular career path is not appropriate, never was appropriate, because a lot of people are coming to security as their second career anyway. They come to the party with a skill. It's about interoperability, as you said, Gavin. It's not about suddenly saying, "Oh dear, Gavin, you are not a DevSecOps engineer, ergo you can't do security." It's about saying you should appreciate it, but we're not going to say that you should be it. What do you think about the singular career path idea?
Well, for fear of putting us all out of a job, ideally, security would be cross-disciplinary. It would be a function that everyone has to adopt in doing whatever it is they do. But the reality is that it's not that easy.
But people have a day job, don't they?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I think the reality is we'll see security become what safety did, a couple of decades ago, where it was driven as part of an organizational culture that everybody is responsible for safety to themselves and others. It will be the same as security, and it will take on that mindset. It reminds me, on a panel recently, somebody said you should hire for attitude, not aptitude. Was that you, Katie? I can't remember
Yeah.
who it was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I call you out on that one.
some of the salespeople that I used to work with had that on their sort of sign-off slogan, and it kind of made me
Yeah.
cringe because I thought I said, "Are you telling me that you don't have aptitude?" You know what I mean? Like
No, I would maybe revise that. Yeah. But I think
yeah.
a lot of the time the skills can be learnt, but the attitude can't. And that does hark back to your point about this being a
Yeah.
singular career path. I think it does really help if you've got experience in other areas because you need to be able to apply security in context. Whether it's a business, you need to understand the business objectives, whether it's a high net worth individual or a smaller organization, a family office, you need to understand what their priorities are because often security is at one end of the scale and flexibility is at the other end of the scale. And if you don't pitch your controls in the right place, then they're either going to be bypassed or they simply won't work.
You see, but I think that is a right saying because I think security is a attitude, the same as safety. It's a mindset, and you can teach people to do something, and you can teach them to do it very well. And the more they do it, the better they're going to become at it. I also think, you also asked about convergence. Can one person have all these plethora of skill sets and capabilities? Well, no. I think people naturally do what they're good at, and you will grow them. As a manager, one of your responsibilities is to grow people and nurture them. The same as what has happened to me throughout my career. Um, we should be doing the same with the new talent that's coming in. If they've got the right attitude, that's so much easier. They will start to adopt those working practices that you're teaching. If they haven't got the right attitude, that's very difficult. So I think aptitude comes easier with attitude, and so I think that is the right thing. And with security, you can't be an expert of everything. It was on one of your forums recently, Phelim, that one of your panelists talked about security being a mile wide and inch deep, and then we discussed, do we need to be a mile wide or inches deep, or mile wide and a mile deep? And the reality is, I don't think. Well, I've never met one person who's great at everything. I've met some people who are brilliant at convergence and doing the cyber and physical stuff, but there is a limit. And I think it's what convergence really is the ability to interoperate between those different skill sets and all the different things that we do. And you can better achieve that with a team with the right attitude, where you can take them to the aptitude they need to be instead of the other way around.
And you two, you seem to have the right attitude. Maybe I'm trying to, flatter you or something, but you do seem to have the right attitude. You're together. How do you do that? How do you work in a converged way, both of you together?
It's
I think
knowing what
that's
you don't
Katie having a
know,
lot of
right?
tolerance. I think that's Katie's tolerant of me, but no.
I am very
Yeah, very.
understanding. But you need to know what you don't know, and you need to know when to ask questions. So you can
Yeah,
work off frameworks, you can have checklists, but ultimately, if you've got relationships with people who specialize in different areas and you can pick their brains when you know it's relevant, then you're going to get the best result.
I think there's a high level of respect. So, it doesn't matter how good you are at what you do, you have to be very respectful of how good other people are at what they do. And if you can see that in others and you've got a high level of respect and appreciation of what the other person does, you can better work together. And when my work relationship with Katie happened very quickly in that we didn't know each other before we started working together, but we just seemed to click. And I think that mutual respect and ability to want to learn from each other grew very quickly with practicing a converged approach to security. But we did know Peter, obviously, who's the CEO of Toro, and I think he was very apt at picking us because he probably identified that actually we would be able to work cohesively in order to be able to approach what we wanted to do as a business. And we were only able to do that, I'd say, working in a converged space where you're able to practice cyber and physical security together actually brings out that ability very quickly. You have to, because you're having to think more holistically. You can't just think in your own silos. You're watching what the other person is doing, and you're picking up so much around how to more effectively and appropriately manage risk, because you're taking a more holistic view of it than you were before. So in the few years I've been working closely with Katie, Peter, and the others at Toro, it's been nothing but an education, and I thought I had that education before I came into Toro. I've had to rethink the way I approach things drastically in order to not just keep pace, but to add value. So I think if you do practice convergence, you will, if you do it well and you're working with the right people and you're open to change, your abilities will significantly improve very, very rapidly.
I think we have very high expectations of ourselves as well. So challenge is really important. We have healthy challenge. We have honest conversations, and we challenge each other if we think that there is something to question. And it's really important to be able to have those conversations. I think you can often encounter big egos in some disciplines and people that aren't prepared to admit when they don't know something or when they've made a mistake. And that culture is really important to challenge, because that's not the culture from which we learn and grow. And that applies in security as a whole. You want to create a security culture where people feel comfortable to speak up and admit if they've made a mistake or done something wrong so that you can address it and fix it.
Which is great on your side, and it's great on your working relationship. But if I'm a listener and I'm in the world of corporate security, how can I make all of this gel with my corporate structure? Because I'm thinking of perhaps an organization that is quote unquote traditional. They have a budget for guarding. They have a budget for cameras. They have a separate IT budget, and then there's this other kind of infosec budget. How could your collaborative work gel with their budgetary silos?
One quick way is testing. So engage a red team to attack your organization, because with the flexibility to be the attacker, you can demonstrate that the vulnerabilities are in those gaps between your different budget holders, your functions, your physical security, your cyber security, and your personnel security. And then once you present the results of that, you can show that actually maybe these functions need to be a bit more joined up, because when we simulated an attack, that's where the gaps were.
Yeah, that's called simulate to integrate, and that is so powerful. And I think we're doing that far more in organizations where we are moving our mindsets, particularly in the security industry, where we're not thinking about could this happen. We're looking at more appropriately, as in when this happens. So we're moving away from likelihood assessment to more consequence assessment, because we know bad things are happening more so, and we have to have that mindset of resilience. But I think here's another one Katie said the other day at your Convergence forum: go down the pub and have a chat. And I think there's a powerful thing around that, because we're not talking enough. It's just breaking down those silos and those barriers to do that. And it's that mutual respect for each other.
Yeah, but
if you can speak the same language, you're able to overcome far more. And if you really want to tackle the budgets, if you can simulate those attacks, you can figure out exactly where your vulnerabilities are, you will identify them, and you can more appropriately budget for your defences.
So
It can be
you
really
could.
challenging, though, can't it? If you're
Yeah.
in an
Of course it can be.
organization where you are very much told to stay in your swim lane and you might not be in a position, you can build great relationships with your counterparts in other teams, but you might not be in a position to change where those budgets sit and who holds the purse strings. But if
Yeah.
you do have good relationships, then you can work together to try and align your strategic objectives and manage upwards as well as managing downwards. But it is challenging.
And
Yeah.
for all the goodwill and pub talk in the world, which we do encourage, of course, how have you managed to work with companies to make this succeed? Because, have you managed to change their budgeting methodology? Have you managed to maybe draw relationships from InfoSec and health and safety and EP? How has your service worked in that regard?
Yeah, it's communication. We do a lot of workshops, and it's really about bringing everybody around the table for a common goal. And what you quite often find before you go into the workshop or you start having these conversations, they're all thinking in different directions. What you want to do is put them together to start thinking in the same direction. And the moment
So,
you can do that,
you take a piece of each person's budget.
well, you take a piece of each person's focus. What are your priorities? Quite often we all focus on our own priorities, our own objectives, our own goals, and that's what we're sticking to. And that will only work so far when you're all trying to get the same budget from the same pot, and somebody has to decide who's having what. And they're always going to, I guess, go with what they know. So that if that risk assessment says the cyber team need more money because we've got to do this, and this is all the incidents that are happening, that's what the risk assessment says. Quite often they're going to go, well, yeah, you're right, this is what we have to do. We don't have a choice in that. But if you think more holistically, if you're bringing all of those priorities, all those singular objectives and that siloed thinking together, and you're learning an appreciation for actually the bigger picture, what needs to be achieved. And quite often in a business, it needs to survive. It needs to earn money. It needs to be profitable. Security isn't their first focus. Quite often, the problem that we have as security professionals, as with any other discipline, I guess, we think that what we do has to be the priority. It has to be the focus of everybody else, and we're not figuring out how we should tailor our approach or our solutions to make it sit within the business or the organizational context. And if we can do that a little bit better, and the way to do that is to understand where the priorities are, where the objectives are, and what needs to be done, we can then have a better conversation. And that, again, it goes back down to a common complaint we hear from security professionals, is that we don't have a voice at the top table. And I think that's a structural thing as well, because where you see there's a strong chief security officer, a strong chief risk officer who's looking more holistically and not just the CISO or the head of cyber or the head of physical, you're starting to see somebody who's actually being able to look at the bigger strategic requirement and fit what security needs to do within the organizational objectives, and not what the organizational objectives need to do to fit within the security requirements.
You keep coming back to risk, and I think that's a key point. The most mature clients we have that are addressing this in a converged way are doing so because they recognize at the top table that the risk is converged. But you're quite right, Phelim, that in most instances, it doesn't work like that. And where we have worked with clients who have managed to get buy-in across the different security disciplines, it often happens piecemeal. Will often do one thing because they've got a line in their budget for their annual cyber pen test. But as part of that engagement, because we're always considering the holistic approach, if we flag actually that there was something more related to social engineering on top of that, which is actually a human risk, or that there's a physical element that they need to address, then that will start conversations with the other teams, and vice versa. If we've done a physical security review, but it's pointed out that there are network security vulnerabilities, they're going to have to liaise with the the IT team or the IT security team to address those network vulnerabilities that have an impact on the intruder alarm system or the access control. And it might force the conversation between the teams that will hopefully get them to align their agendas. And I've seen this in practice in a recent and ongoing client engagement where Gavin did a security review for a physical premises, but the report and the results of this has been raised with the information security team because actually these things are not disparate anymore. And off the back of that, a bunch of actions have been identified and security improvement program is being implemented. So you can approach it in different ways and it happens in different orders, but hopefully the end game, the long-term goal is that we'll get there with converged security.
And so to help our listener, to help the protector, the corporate security leader, get there, as you said, right? You mentioned at the beginning that maybe IT was your hobby. You were able to tinker around, and this I think is quite useful as a tool. Many people seem to also like on the cybersecurity side, they do try hack me and tinker around with ciphers and try and decipher them, and it's a very, very hands-on way. But I guess this brings us to the kind of nature nurture question, because lots of people have second careers that are security and they've come from somewhere. What are your thoughts against the backdrop of the question of the singular career path when you do see some people who come straight out of college and they begin in security? Like, how do we reconcile the need to bring something to the party with the emergence of people who are coming fresh?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm biased because I started off, on an IT help desk and then grew with that into cybersecurity. And I do find it strange when we see applicants who have done a cybersecurity degree, but they don't know the foundational IT infrastructure that most organizations run on. And I think, how can you protect it if you don't know how it works in the first place? I do think it helps if you've got some of that foundational knowledge, some of those building blocks. And even just understanding how a business operates is really important, because ultimately you're going to be most successful in your security objectives if they enable and align with business objectives. And when we've run workshops and roundtables in the recent past, that ended up being the conclusion of all the experts and all the professionals around the table, was that unless they had the ear of the business, unless what they were trying to achieve furthered the business's objectives, then they weren't going to get anywhere with security.
I think, you've got to hire for the individual. I think, I've known some really great people to constantly hammer at the door, but it's never been opened for them. And that's upsetting. I think it's really around looking for the right people for the right roles. And quite often you have to go on your gut feeling for that. And those positions. Experience counts for a lot of things. Attitude also counts for a lot as well. And it's making sure that you hire the right person into the role. And again, I think you can, I have no problem with hiring somebody in a second career if I know they're going to be the right person for the job and they're going to add value.
But how do they get past the CV stage? Because you don't, like they've got the CV and
or starting out in security if they've been doing something else.
Yeah, I mean, or something not too amazingly dissimilar in the world of security. Lots of people come from the military or the police. And yes, there's always that challenge of having to demonstrate commerciality and the ability to transition. I get that. But what we're talking about here is knowing the person and knowing that they've got the right attitude.
You're not going to know that at CV stage. And you've got the age-old adage of you need experience to get experience, which is really tough when you're trying to break into a new career.
I've read some great CVs. I employed somebody who wasn't strong in what I was employing them for, but they gave me a great CV and told me what they were really good at and how they were going to apply themselves to be better at what I wanted them to do. And so, you get a lot of generic CVs and you get a lot of people who don't try. They're just throwing the CV across. I want to see effort and I want to see the right attitude and the wanting to become the best that they can be. And it's normally with those people that you are more willing to give your time to bring them up to the level that they need to be so they can start doing it more naturally. So I do think I am very much an individual who hires around the person as opposed to just qualification alone.
But do you think maybe seeing that tinkering, if it, let's say
if you've got personal projects, if you've demonstrated like you've put yourself through a little bit of training, it doesn't need to be expensive, but you've found some courses online, you've demonstrated that you're willing to apply yourself, you're showing an interest in something beyond just I want a job. Yes, I think all that counts for sure.
Absolutely. And it's not just the CV, it's actually the letter that sits behind that, why you're going for the job. Don't make it generic, make it personable and make it relevant to what you're applying for.
Don't worry, AI will make it very relevant. Yes.
Well, that's the difficulty too.
That's the difficulty with AI. And the problem is I was speaking to somebody recently who was complaining about having to read through a few hundred CVs, and sometimes you just got the right stack and the wrong stack, haven't you? The reality is you've got to give your time to find the right person, because you can go through to final rounds and you're never going to find the right person, but they've been there all the time. I don't think there's a trick in it. What I do know about security, there is a network there. Somebody always knows somebody else and there's always recommendations. So I think it's a bit of both, following fair process and giving everybody the opportunity, but reading into the individual. And whilst AI can make things stand up and sound great, it will fail you if you can't hold up to that in your interview. Then all you're doing is wasting people's time, and you would eventually get called out from that. I think be yourself, be honest, and be applicable to the role that you're applying for. If you're applying for a job just for the sake of getting a job and you're not going to enjoy it, you won't enjoy the job. And that will stand out fairly quickly.
So can we ask an actually useful question about AI? There is tons of AI content online that might or might not be useful, but I think a useful question could be around the topic of convergence. Do you think it will be the standing on the shoulders of giants technology that enables, let's say, a manned guard to work on a CI/CD pipeline on software development, right? Because the prevalence of codeless compute will be fantastically useful for the people who cannot code, and the prevalence of lots of tools that require conversational interaction rather than something more complex. Do we feel that this could be key to enabling not the singular career path, but that appreciation?
No, there's so many unknowns about AI right now. I think what we're seeing every day is just the tip of what is to come and what it can do for you. It still needs a lot of input. AI will make you sound more clever than what you are if you feed the right things into it. But you've still got to know your subject and how it's going to be presented, and you will very quickly get called out if you're using it to put yourself in a position that you really know nothing about.
I think AI will enable convergence to the extent that, in your example, someone employed in a man guarding position might be leveraging more technology tooling from, say, a monitoring and detection perspective, and the interoperability of that function from a physical security perspective in combination with a software tool that supports your monitoring and detection capability AI could plug the gap. I read an article just yesterday that was a research study on AI tooling in several organizations that had been implemented to improve productivity, and everyone using it swore blind that they were working quicker and getting the jobs done faster. But the results of the research actually proved the opposite, that they weren't completing their tasks any quicker. They were just going down rabbit holes of all the possible ways of completing their tasks using the AI tooling, and actually just going into far more depth and detail than they needed to, which I found quite interesting. Because to Gavin's point, whether it's AI or any piece of technology, it's still really only as good as the people operating it. And we frequently encounter organizations that want to spend their money on the shiny tools. But unless you configure those tools, unless you tune them to your environment, then you won't get the value out of them. And I think, especially for those authorizing perhaps that spend, who aren't in the detail, who are being told by the people leading on that technology strategy that this tool will be the silver bullet, and it ticks a box that we've got 24/7 monitoring, and look at all these thousands of alerts that are coming in and all of these attacks that we're preventing. But a lot of it is still noise. And the AI can help filter through some of that noise and support analysts who might otherwise be having to do that manually. But you still need the context. You still need to align it with the business so that you get what you need out of it. And I think there's still a gap there.
But that's still useful for the protector. And that I'm putting myself in the mind of the audience, going, well, I am this. I am a corporate security leader, and I'm frequently told to get back in my box. So there is a side of convergence where maybe I am not the CISO, but I can be a super corporate security leader using this technology and appreciating the other side. Maybe I want to do an advance, and my AI thing says, this type of hotel room has a weird HVAC system. Have you checked it? I don't know. I'm spitballing.
Look, I'm a big fan of technology and security, but I think we need to be mindful that technology needs to support the human capability, not the human capability support the technology. And quite often, I do a lot of security design, and I do like the use of AI-enabled CCTV systems, both to detect threat, event-driven capability. I think that really is the way forward, because it gives you greater eyes and ears. Detection without visualization isn't really detection. If you can get a really good understanding of what's going on, you can make a better judgment and response capability. But all too often with the systems where you have spent out for event-driven technology, it's just not set up properly. So if you want the system to only detect unusual activity, human movement or vehicle movement, it's still detecting when there's a tree moving, a shadow or a fox because it just hasn't been set up properly. And I think a lot of this falls down with operational objectives. A lot of security designs are putting in this technology as a baseline, but it's not actually, they're not actually designing it to achieve an end result. This is what it does, let's put it in there, but actually operationally it's not working for them. So a lot of these systems are falling down when you audit them because it's not achieving what the security team need. But it is available, it is having a significantly positive impact on what we do as individuals and as an industry, but we have to keep it in perspective. And it's around using technology for how you want to be able to operate more effectively and efficiently. And I think that's quite often lost in when
and recognizing that you're likely to have to spend a lot of time up front, as you say, to set it up to achieve your objectives, to configure it, to tune it. You're not just buying a piece of technology and going, there we go, it's done now.
Yeah. And in my experience, a really good setup, event-driven CCTV system, for example, would take a good 2 to 3 months to bed in. So the AI has learnt enough to understand the environment. And you've got to appreciate that these things will take time. And if you're just going to go onto Google to try and find a smarter way to write a CV or a policy, it's unless you know what you're talking about and have a good understanding of it, it's probably not going to do exactly what you need it to do. It won't be as good as it needs to be, quite honestly. And whilst that may work in some organisations where you're the expert or supposedly the expert and nobody knows any better, somebody will come along and have a look and go, well, that doesn't make much sense to me. And having a policy, having a procedural process that doesn't make much sense won't really work well. It's making things work for you, and it's having that end game. What do you want it to do? What needs to be achieved at the end of this? What does that outcome need to be? And I think if you look at it with that mindset and that attitude and approach, you can do a lot of amazing things with technology and AI. And most importantly, and it goes back to what we discussed at the beginning, it's being open to others. It's speaking to the right people. It's when we do a physical security review, it only takes me a minute to call Katie or one of her team and go, this is a question I have. Am I correct? And can you give me something? Because I think I need to raise this to the client. You can't be an expert in everything, but if you do have access to a wider range of experts, it makes you a lot better. That's for sure.
So we're not advocating for the super Katie Gavin person. We're still advocating for a cyber expert and a physical expert.
I mean, a combination of both of us would be a pretty fantastic human being, but we've got to be realistic about it, right?
Yeah, I think that you're only as good as the people around you, right? And having that strength of team and getting the right people to do the right work is key. I think that you do become better by working with each other because you're learning new skills constantly. And at Toro, we at least once a week we're training each other. We deliver cross training, and that's why we're constantly learning. So you can be better at security following a holistic approach. But I think there is too much skills, too many qualifications, too many things that you have to do to be a super converged security person. I think that's, we are only human after all.
So where's the limit? Like, do we want to, in our super team, have reputational risk? Do we want to have the insurance guru, maybe the financial risk guru? Like, where's the limits to this convergence?
Well, we would certainly consider those risks, and it comes down to risks depending on the context of the individual, the organization, the company. And if financial risk was one of their higher concerns, then we would definitely be tapping into the SME who deals in financial risk, knowing that we have a baseline of questions that we should be asking and risks associated with financial processes and controls that do overlap with our respective disciplines. And if those questions, the answers to those questions raises a flag, then we can start to unpick it and bring in the necessary SME if we need to.
I think know the requirements, understand the requirements, and work to those. I do like these convergence or more holistic training courses that are coming along, and a good leader, somebody that I worked with and respect a lot, just talked about the brilliant basics. So you can't know everything, but you need to know what you need to know. And if you can understand the basics of each of these security disciplines that we have, it will give you a good footing in order to be able to have the conversation, engage with the expert. So we are only human. We know we are limited in capability, but we're not unlimited in our ability to speak or bring the right person at the right time. So I do like the idea of the converged security training that we're starting to see now, because it gives people an understanding of what those brilliant basics need to be. And I think that's the way forward. So it gives you that start point to identify when you have a requirement and to be able to act on it.
Do you think that, just thinking about our listenership, if they know of a new entrant to the world of work, or maybe they want to jump career paths, do you think that's then useful? Because rather than maybe 10 years ago, people were imagining the singular career path and so on, I don't know, maybe they still are, but it's useful to say which slice of security do you want to go into, rather than off you go. You could do everything.
Absolutely. And it wasn't until I did my master's degree that I fully appreciated what I was naturally good at and what I wasn't. And as Katie says, what I should stay away from, because I just have the ability to blow things up like that. So absolutely, it does. And I think people will naturally sit in what they're good at, and it goes back to that nurturing. With what I appreciate in my career, in people saw what I was really good at and nurtured me to become better. There's no, sometimes, and that's not to say you shouldn't try different things, but sometimes if you're great at one thing, why do you have to try and be great at something else and you never get there? So it's then being able to build up the team around you, so you've got everything covered, as we do at Toro, in that you're around it because you've got the right people to build up the team and working cohesively together. You're constantly cross-teaching, but everybody's doing what they're great at, and they're not trying to be great at everything because it's just not part of their natural ability to do so. So I think the training, the education, the way the industry is going, particularly towards a higher learning, is in the right direction. It's not perfect, but it gives people an understanding of the skills and the types of jobs out there for them to decide actually what you want to learn and where you want to be focused on. And I think to do that, you can become a super security person because you become great at what you're good at.
Or we can take people from the world of law.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I know what happens when things go wrong, and I'd rather be there to prevent it rather than, which is ironic given that we do cyber incident response. So. But I would rather prevent the incident than deal with the litigation post-event.
Yeah, Katie is probably one of the best security people I've ever worked with, although she started out on the dark path.
But again, I think it's the practitioner piece, right? It's knowing what it feels like to be the client, and then applying that in a consultancy situation helps.
Sometimes you've got to stop thinking about what we want and actually start focusing on what our clients want. And that's really key, and that's how you start delivering a security service. It's adapting what we know we need to do, and sometimes you just have to do it in bite-sized chunks to get to the bigger goal that has to be achieved.
Okay. So where then does this leave us in our convergence topic, and what's next for both of you?
I think it leaves us continuing to learn, doesn't it? And for us, it's about trying to instill that approach on all of our projects and with all of our clients and long-term partnerships.
Don't just say it, do it. Do what works for you. A converged approach in one organization or one team may look different to another organization, another team. I do feel that convergence is driven by risk management, and I do think risk management is changing more to resilience. As the world's changing, things become more fast-paced. And I do think technology will have a significant influence on how we do security and what convergence looks like. But convergence to me is working with subject matter experts in lots of different fields and constantly learning from them so that I can do my job better.
And resilience is key. The shift, the mindset, the expectation, whether it's from the regulators or otherwise, is what happens when, not if. And to know that, you have to test it. You can't just have a checkbox of controls and say, I've done my annual pen test, therefore security, check, because you don't know how resilient you are unless you've put yourself through the paces. And the best way to do that is to put your attacker hat on, think about how you would target the crown jewels, and really test yourself, whether that is through a cyber security vulnerability, a security vulnerability in the physical premises, or socially engineering the people involved. And if you're honest with yourself about that, then you'll be able to spot the vulnerabilities too and hopefully defend against them.
Yeah, as one of our colleagues says, training without testing isn't really training. So you constantly test because the everything changes, but absolutely.
Fantastic. Plus, it's fun trying to break into buildings.
It is.
Right, I'm gonna use that as a quote. I'll put it at the very beginning. No, but this is fantastic. Thank you for spending the time with the podcast on this topic. It's a topic that people have hashed over quite a bit, but I think that we've made it a little more practical. We made it a bit more reachable, and we haven't done down the individual specialisms, which I think is really key at this juncture. So, Gavin and Katie, thanks very much for coming on. This has been another fantastic edition of the Circuit Magazine podcast. Well, thank you very much, Gavin and Katie from Toro Solutions. I think reimagining convergence and seeing how it's not becoming the one individual makes it all the more applicable to the singular protector. What do you think, Elijah?
I agree. I think they did a great job of kind of illustrating that and playing off of each other's skills and talents. And then as they talked, you could see as a protector how that could be of benefit in order to have someone that you can, this is my skill set, here is your skill set, and how do those two, pun intended, converge?
Yeah, indeed. And whilst we are using the parlance of convergence, I don't know if I like the word so much anymore. I feel interoperability is a good indicator, or just appreciating other skill sets, other specialists, because I do remember when I was doing the Convergence event series, when I started 10 years ago myself, people said, well, we've been talking convergence for 20 years. So if you add that up, today they've apparently been talking 30 years about convergence. However, I would say to them that many people imagined a singular career path. And I think that especially in protection is often a second career that is dependent on a first career. Obviously, there are loads of roles. There's roles for people fresh out of college.
Right.
There's roles for people out of the SF. But it's not a singular career path. What do you think?
Right. No, I agree. I think sometimes if you took the term or the word literally, convergence, you might think it means one person doing all of these things. But I think Gavin mentioned in a discussion here, his definition of convergence, or the thing that he would, he would use in place of that was interconnectivity. And I think used the term, he said interconnectivity driving performance. And I thought, wow, that's a great description of it, right? You take the cyber aspect and you take the physical security aspect, which might be performed by different operators, but you figure how to blend those things together in service of the client. And the other thing that I believe was Katie said was, she said that the reason why this is important, and again, bringing it back to the real world, is that the bad guys practice convergence. The bad guys are working together in different lanes, right, in order to meet their objectives. So why would we treat them so siloed, right? And we not communicated, or we not share information, share best practices, use one to build off of the other to complete the security assessment. If we're not doing that, then we're doing our clients a disservice.
And perhaps then, from the client's perspective, they might find it challenging because they've known to procure EP services from EP operators.
Sure.
They have not maybe known to procure a whole host of other services from the one operator, but there is this, one throat to choke, single, single person that is attractive as a buyer, and I think that will maybe spill over into corporations. I know there are several people who sell cyber to physical security leaders in corporations. One of them speaking at my Phoenix event, as it happens, right? But the thing is, I think that this just reiterates that the protector is less afraid to appreciate, because there's not this, I don't know, standardization out there that maybe when I had 10 years ago, people said, oh, you gotta do everything. And please let me give you one anecdote. I know this anecdote will totally bomb unless you get it. But people were very, very pleased, and they said to me, "You don't start out when you practice medicine. You don't start out as an oncologist, and you work your way back to a general practitioner. So you don't start out as a specialist and you work way back to a generalist." And they thought that was, well, no. You see, at first you think it's a great analogy, and I did too.
I do think it's a great analogy, but go ahead, please. Go ahead. Give me the twist here.
But the twist is that security is not medicine, in that I feel we need to appreciate that maybe bouncers and SF and cybersecurity and actuarial risk and sec DevOps and loss prevention, they're all unique specialisms that should be cherished, whereas medicine is a bit more homogenous. I don't know. I thought I'd throw it out there.
Oh, okay. I see where you're coming from with that. The thing that I would say to this, though, is that I'm of the belief that from a foundational level, protection work has the same foundation. So whether you're doing security or you're in special operations or you're doing corporate EP. And so as I listen to that, I think about the fact that we do start off as generalists, but I do see the play that we're talking about here and how you were making that distinction in specialization, but as it relates to this piece here, I understand in the areas of cyber that you can take the lane from IT and develop skills in IT and then meld those into other aspects of the security world where other people are specializing in those things. And then that security department, right? Whether it's for a high net worth individual, whether it's for a corporate office, whatever that is, a corporate program, that security department benefits from all of those specialized areas converging.
I hadn't quite looked at it that way. So maybe I should revisit that anecdote. I was quick to
I see where you're coming from with that, and maybe this is a great time for like the listeners to kind of chime in on on what their take is. We can even do a poll, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. Answers on a postcard. But we definitely won't get as many answers on a postcard since the episode when we talked about robotics in EP. That one we got a lot of answers on a postcard. But I do like this topic, and I do think it was time to update it. And I'm really grateful to Gavin and Katie for coming on. They are a great team. Maybe it is a great model for us to emulate. What about other things in the world of protection? What's next for you, Elijah?
Oh wow, it's been a busy one for me. When I say about problems, I always call them good problems, and being busy is a good problem. But I've definitely been on the go. I've kind of had my foot on the gas, been doing a lot, both operationally and then involved with the training programs that we do. So we just wrapped one up last month. That went extremely well. And now I'm just getting back to my home office after about about 40 days on the road. And, I'm going through a pile of paperwork, and I'm happy that I was able to get on this conversation with you, listening to these guys, Katie and Gavin, and I look forward to more episodes.
Well, I'm thrilled that we caught you as well to listen and review on this. I hope to do many more intro outros with you. Of course, Jon and Shaun are always there, but it's good to square the circle as well.
Sure.
For me, I have the Phoenix event coming up. Nice. Convergence, right? So segue Convergence.
Wait, real quick. What number is this?
Well, it's the 9th annual Phoenix Cyber-Physical Convergence Forum. And yes, it's a dry heat this time of year, we have to say. It's a dry heat. But it's actually our 15th in-person Phoenix event, because back in the day, I used to do 2 and sometimes 3 per year. I feel that Phoenix is a great hub. A great hub. Well, thank you very much. I feel this was overdue, this update on Convergence, and Gavin and Katie were great to come on. So yes,
and I just want to again encourage the listeners, if you found value in this episode, if you have your thoughts on Convergence, whether it works for you or your operations, please share with us.
Absolutely, yes, we want to hear. It's amazing. People say, "Oh yeah, I've been listening all this time." I'm like, "Well, good, but tell us what you think." It's much appreciated. Fantastic. So from Elijah and myself, this has been another fantastic edition of the Circuit Magazine podcast.
You have been listening to the Circuit Magazine podcast. Be sure to subscribe and be sure to not miss an episode.